Just Eff It. Hi, I'm Romy.
Hi, and I'm Carla.
And together we are the
EFFing
Madres. We are here to invite you guys into stories of some inspiring madres
who have changed their lives through an Eff It moment. So here we go. Just Eff It. Good morning. Happy Monday. Laughing because, we always have some sort of technical difficulties.
But it was a rough start.
Yeah, we are the EFFing Madres, and we normally bring on other moms, but since our break, and actually before our break, we started to change things up a little bit, just because we've had some things that have come up that we thought were important to talk about. And so today's one of those days where Romy and I are going to have a deep conversation of something that, we watched the Pamela Anderson documentary a couple weeks ago, and it just sparked a topic that we want to talk about. Although, to be quite honest with you, it's like we don't really know how to talk about it in a way that doesn't sound like really taboo or controversial. Or like maybe make us look weird, but you know what? Fuck it. We don't care, because this is the conversation that she and I are having, and we want to talk about it. So, and we both have daughters, and you'll understand more of why I say that as we go along. But anything you want to say, Romy?
Having growing pains, and we're wanting to grow with our podcast and with ourselves. We're going through a lot, and so as it's organically coming up, we feel this is our space, that we're creating to have these conversations. So why not just effing break it up sometimes and have some, effing weird discussions as mothers and women, which ultimately is what this whole entire space is for. Right. So there'll be some madres, some Mondays that are just sharing their effort moment and their effort conversations that need to be had. And then sometimes we will be. Right. So this conversation, I think, like you said, Carla, though, it's a hard one.
Yeah,
to talk about.
It's a hard one. But basically, I guess why we had this conversation is because we watched the Pamela Anderson documentary, and she spoke a lot about sexualization and being sexualized all her life, and her looks being her commodity, but like she knew it was her commodity. However, she also understood that she like had to rely on other things as well. And it just kind of started to make us like talk about how, as we grew up, and a lot of people that we know grew up, being sexualized was like part of our daily lives, and we have daughters, and it's just something that we feel is important to be aware of, at least for us, to teach our daughters to be mindful of it, to be aware of it, and to know that like it's not, you can get through life not just based on your looks. Like you can actually like, have other things going for you other than that. So yeah, it's an interesting topic.
Yeah. And on that, so I had watched the Pamela Anderson Netflix show. If you guys haven't watched it, I do recommend it. It's a great documentary with so much content, like so much. It brought up a lot. It was very triggering for me. And I remember telling Carla, hey, I just watched this Netflix documentary, and I was like crying for like 3 hours afterwards, like just crying in bed with just, I couldn't understand exactly why I was having such a strong reaction to it. So it obviously was bringing something up in me, right? So I reached out to you, I let you know, and I was like posting like, hey guys, you guys got to watch this. And then Carla watched it, and then you text me as I'm putting Frankie to bed one night, and you're like, I just watched it and I'm curious because it's so you. How and why? What did that bring up for you? I would like to understand why that made you so emotional. And I remember I was like getting ready to put my daughter to bed. Ironically, I'm sitting here looking at my little girl, and I'm like, fuck. And we start texting, and the conversation just got so deep and so big as I'm like putting my child to bed. Like, I'm like, Oh my God, like we're really going somewhere. And probably I'd like to say this honestly, I don't think I've ever really had that conversation with like anybody in my life.
Mm.
I don't really think I've ever tapped into owning a little piece of what we owned in that conversation because it would be so looked down upon to
Mhm.
kind of look at yourself maybe in that way, right? So that's where it gets like a little confusing. So when I'm saying that, I mean in the way for me, I was very sexualized growing up, right? I was very sexualized as a young girl. I was not an ugly child. My looks were focused on. This is where it gets hard to talk. To say that about
Yeah.
yourself or to speak about yourself that way feels like but it that I grew up with my looks being my focus from a very,
Mhm.
very young age. And I developed breast really early. And I started to feel the pressure and the views of older men. I knew
Mhm.
this kind of worth that I was starting to create, this kind
Based
of
around your looks.
based around my looks. I know you and I started getting into that where it was like
Mhm.
at a young age, even in school, even with peers, even with friends, even in social situations, I knew I was almost, I gotta be really careful with the words on this, almost just kind of that became the focus. For me, it was less about how smart I was, how kind I was, how funny I was, how I could have the world. It was, you're so pretty. You're
Mhm.
so this. Those are the words of affirmations that I got as a child that I got and I got and I got. And I think that's where
Mhm.
you and I started to be like, this is kind of a good conversation to have because we do have daughters. And what power are we giving
Mhm.
that?
To yeah. By even saying something as simple as you look so cute. Like that is I mean, I know I haven't had as much of that as you
I
have,
have.
but but like for me as well, once I went from like that gawky, awkward phase to people starting to pay attention to me, I started to think, oh, this is my worth.
Mhm.
This is what makes me great, is that, because that's what everyone else is telling me. And it's now being in my 40s, now as we're getting older, and not seeing the same thing that we've been used to seeing in the mirror. It's it's like it's a hard pill to swallow, and like how do we deal with that now moving forward as we continue to age, knowing that it's not all about that, but it's been so much about that. Like I've gotten jobs because,
That's what we were saying.
like one of the guys there wanted to hire me because he wanted to date me. Like now I think about in high school, I can't even believe this was a category. You know how they have like funniest or like most success or whatever. I was most attractive. I was voted most attractive with this other guy. And I was like, now I think about it, I'm like, why the fuck is that a category
Should not be.
for kids?
Should not be.
Should not
Absolutely
be.
should not be. Like
No.
absolutely not. And that's, as your daughter gets older, you're going to see like my daughter is in school now where kids are now. She is saying things that let me know that she's aware of shapes,
Hmm.
sizes. She said something in the car the other day, boys don't like it if you're not pretty. That's what she said.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here and I'm listening to this as I know we've been having these conversations and I'm like, no, honey, they like smart and funny and you are all of those things. And then, I catch myself, you're so cute, you're so cute, you're so cute, you're so cute, you look so pretty, you look so pretty, you look so pretty. And then I'm like, but you're funny and you're kind and you're super smart and you're loving. And I have to catch myself because that's how I was raised. Like,
Hmm.
that's how I was talked to.
Hmm.
And if I do that to her, it's almost like you and I saying, let's remove that as the tool. It's going to be
Hmm.
there. If you're an attractive person, unfortunately, I didn't make this shit up. It's going to be there. It's going to happen in the world where it's so unfortunate that you have a door into a job maybe or a door into somewhere over this person or that person based on something that has nothing to do with you didn't create your looks, you didn't fucking make yourself look that way, right?
Hmm.
So if we
Hmm.
remove that attention and that being the focus,
Yeah.
what would the world be like?
Oh my God.
If we just stopped talking like that, right? We
Mhm.
just removed that dialogue. And so maybe you are an attractive, or maybe you did develop early as a girl, but like what if we just didn't talk about that and we just focused on, you know, how smart you are, what you want to be, how kind you are, how funny you are, like how much you work out because you're strong, right? Not because your body is better than someone else's, but more I acknowledge that you care about your health, or you care about, being strong or whatever it is. Like telling somebody in high school that you're the most attractive right there, Carla,
Yeah. Yeah.
are you kidding me?
Yeah. I know. I can't now.
Yeah.
Obviously, like at that age, I was like, oh my God, like this is
Yeah.
great. I'm glad everyone thinks this. I'm gonna, but like now I would be so infuriated if I found out that that was something that my daughter could be voted into.
The thought of that, like thinking of Frankie getting older, if they were at school saying this person was voted the most attractive, like I would lose my shit on a school right now. I would absolutely lose my shit. And I think in the Pamela Anderson documentary, what was really triggering for me was that she is a girl that was, sexualized, taken advantage of at a very young age. And then ultimately, this became her tool. She's not an idiot. She's not a dumb blonde. She is a girl like all of us who that became her tool.
Mm-hmm.
She used it in her life to
Yep.
make a successful career for herself. It's what she had. She
Mm-hmm.
knew she had it. And sure, it sounded like, I don't know her personally, but that there was pain through knowing that that was her tool,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And I think I really triggered, I loved the fact that she didn't play a victim to it. She didn't
Mm-hmm.
say the world took advantage of me, or the world put me in this and I'm a victim to life. She was like, this is what I had.
Yeah.
And this is what I used. And during that time, especially, right? Like during the 80s and the 70s and stuff like that, like sex was like, you found that tool, you found your looks, and you did whatever you could do with, with them. And even for me, like I felt like, I was on a reality show. We were very sexualized. I knew my worth was in how much I provided shocking content. I knew it was based around, my sexuality or what I identified for. So I started to like almost relate to the song and dance of life, to
Mm-hmm.
performing for people.
Mm-hmm.
So much so that I was disconnected to who I really fucking was,
Right.
because
Yeah.
I was so wrapped up in, oh, we're here. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is what people want from me. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is who I'm supposed to be. And you get lost in that. Just like I'm sure we've said it, like you can walk into a room and you can feel your power or your presence based on nobody even talking to you.
Yeah.
That can be hard. It can be confusing and conflicting. And it's, I think, for both of us, something we don't want our girls to like hold a lot of time in, space in that.
Yeah. No. No.
But like you and I have said, as we're getting older, we're not 20 anymore. We're not, we're changing. We're looking at ourselves. And I think over the last, getting into our 40s, we're like, who are we other than like just that? Who the hell are we?
How is that going to affect us more as we get older for our own psyche because of the fact that it's been so ingrained in us and like basically most of the people we've grown up with
Yep.
still in
Yep.
society today?
Yes.
Because what do young girls look up to? Kim Kardashian and all of these people, like this like fake unattainable, I mean unless you can spend tons of money on plastic surgery, sense of beauty. And it's just like, okay, like what do we do as we start to get older? Like that's starting to that's at least for me,
Yeah.
it's starting to be like, dang, like this fucking sucks.
I want to be really fucking smart. I want to like know shit. I want to be powerful and working. I want to be in tune with myself. Like I'm really looking inward in a way
Mhm.
that I haven't, because ultimately, like, I'm not some young hot thing out there. I'm not a Kardashian.
Yeah.
I'm not that life isn't there. It goes away. For all of you listening who are wrapped up in it, you're going to wake up one day and it's gone. Okay? Like,
Yeah.
and like, who are you left with? Who are you as a
Mhm.
woman? Who are you as a mother? Who are you as a
Yeah.
friend? Who are you in this world when you
Mhm.
remove how you feel physically? And like, what if we took back that and didn't give, like, almost just didn't give anyone that power to like put that like that kind of value in us, right?
Yeah.
And like with society, with the Kardashians, like you said, it's almost, I'm not here to be another person to like diss the Kardashians. I get work, I do what I need to do to stay young and stay feeling good about myself, whatever I can afford or whatever feels good to me. Like I don't want to age, but it's happening. But the
Yeah.
standard of which people have gone backwards is almost impossible. And why are you and I struggling with it? You know what I mean? Let's be real. Like, why are we struggling with this?
Well, I mean, I think I will speak for
Yeah.
myself. I think I'm struggling with it because I'm no longer seeing what I saw in the mirror. Like I'm starting to see I don't look as fresh and all of that, and it's hard. Like it's really starting to make me think about like, oh man, like I mean, I know I've always had other things to offer, but I think I myself have been like I've quieted myself and not expressed myself in ways that I feel I should have at times because I knew that they were looking at
Uh-huh.
my exterior and basing a lot of their judgment and their like, oh, we should hire her or not based on that.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I made myself quiet in a lot of those situations, which I think back now and I'm like, so stupid. Like I can't believe I let that happen. I don't want to be that like, oh, the pretty quiet girl that just like lets people kind of push her around, Like I don't want my daughter to be that way. I don't want her to like it could be something that I mean, like, I think she's adorable, but I'm not
Right.
going to sit here and tell her. I don't actually I catch myself all the time because I don't want that to happen to her like it happened to me. I mean, even my mom, the first thing she says to me when she sees me till this day is like, you look older. Your grays, why don't you cover them up? You look too thin. Like there's just no like, hey, you look good. There's none of that.
No.
So I don't want to do that to my daughter and be like, oh, it's all about your looks. Like I want her to be like, oh no, that's just like on the other end. That's not really that important.
I feel like you and I took the opposite too, because I do see that in you. Like hearing you say that, you definitely were more reserved because you didn't have to say much, Carla. It felt like you didn't have to speak up much because you could walk into something and like your presence and your beauty was truly just like it did its job, right? So you kind of like you did. I mean, I've known you. I've seen you walk into rooms since you were young. I've seen you in LA. I've watched your presence, and when you walk into a room, it's powerful, right? Like you're beautiful. So, but I also watched you not come out of your skin
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
through that.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
did the opposite where I almost went to the like, this is all I have.
Mm.
And I'm going to be aggressively loud and obnoxious with it because I just don't know where else any value is in myself. Honestly,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see value in who I am. And here I am,
Mm-hmm.
40, in therapy, crying last Friday because my therapist is trying to help me see that like you feel you're deserving now, you feel you're this now. But like looking back, all I thought was, oh, I'm pretty.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, I think you said something there like, yeah, I put a lot of value in that. So I let that dictate a lot of decisions in my life and a lot of situations in my life when in my head I had a whole different scenario playing out, but I just didn't do it or I didn't say it. And that is just like I have so many regrets because of
Mhm.
that. Just because I was basing it off like I know what that person's thinking because I've heard, other people talk. So I'm just going to like, stay quiet. And that's just
Yeah.
stupid.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I wish I regret now. I mean, but here I am, 40, never too late. You're right, never too late to fucking figure it out, and we are. But I mean, I regret allowing that to be what took over my 20s and 30s, what put me on a show, what put me in like I wish I would have done more work really figuring out who I was and what my value was. And I wish that
Hmm.
there were more people around me, that were like, you was kind, you was pretty, you was smart. Like I really wish that that was something that was around, and it honestly it wasn't. I don't really think
No.
anybody took the time to say, "Hey, do you know that you're more than that?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And like I remember being in 7th grade and then moms looking at me and my friends' legs to make sure that our thighs didn't touch.
Oh my
I
god.
was in 7th grade. Like that
Wow.
was the world that I grew up in. So if you ever look at a kid in junior high or high school and you're judging their body,
Ugh.
you're letting them know that that is where their value is.
Yeah. Yeah, and that
It
needs to
needs to
stop.
end.
And it really does, cuz it really fucks you up.
Oh,
Like it really fucks
completely.
you up when you get to a certain point where you're just like, "Dang, so many years have gone by. I'm changing." And it's weird cuz like it's kind of a little bit of a conundrum because like I am super comfortable in my own skin at this point in my 40s.
Yeah.
So I feel comfortable going out and just like,
Yeah.
being like looking crazy and I don't mind. But then there is this other side of me that's still holding on to those past, like, but people thought this of me. So like I should still try to hold on to that, right? Like it's weird. I'm like living in these two
I
worlds.
I can relate to that, Carla. There's a part of me, this is just being like we're in the tree of trust right now, right? Like we're in the honest tree of trust. Like I would say that like so I'm super active on social media, right? Like I'm always posting on social media and like I can post like a sexy picture or whatever it is or a goofy picture whatever it is. Sometimes I'm afraid to post something that's like too sexy.
Mhm.
I wasn't before in my past. Before I'd be like, I'm fucking naked or like I don't give a shit, right? Like now I almost feel uncomfortable if I'm too sexy.
Mm.
And now and then like I'll like take a sexy photo and then I'll be like, you know what? I'm not going to post this because I need to find my worth and value in like something else, not in
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Like that dialogue is like starting to change for me because it's like, oh, that's
Mhm.
where I get attention. That's how I get validated because that's how I've always been validated. How do I get
Yep.
validated in something else other than that? Because as I get older, as you get older, we're going to wake up. It's not going to be that sexy, Like we're aging. Like, where do we have value? And then how do we show our daughters,
Mhm.
you know, we don't live in this and not put it on them. And like Frankie was saying the other day, we were taking selfies and like I always do the same kind of serious face in my photos, and she like
Mhm.
responded back with like, Mom, why do you always do this? And then so we like took some photos and we were just being goofy and smiling because I was like,
Mm.
you don't think about these things, but like
Yeah.
they do impact your children
Yeah. I
and
know.
girls. And not only
Yeah.
girls, I shouldn't even say that. If you're a mom of a boy, make sure you're having these conversations with your little boys so that they're also not looking at the girls and that's what their value is in them.
Mhm.
It's a combination of both. Like if the little boys are learning, I was raised that like she's cool, she's smart, she's kind, she's funny. Like my family taught me that that was important.
Mhm.
Right? Not, oh, that little girl's pretty, go talk to her, or she's super pretty, or you should end up with her, or that girl's not pretty. Like, stop that dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, something that we've been doing with Nava is whenever she like today, she's never been in a dress before, by the way.
Oh,
We just put her in a dress today just to see what it would look like. And we both thought she looked so cute,
yeah.
but we didn't say that to
Yeah.
her. We looked at her and we're like, "Nava, how does that make you feel? Go look in the mirror. How does that make you feel?"
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's only her opinion should be
Should be what, yeah.
of value. Nobody
Well,
else's.
that's like the podcast you said today with Mel Robbins when she was like, your confidence is ultimately like, what do you think of yourselves? Like she said
Yes.
that today, like just what you
Yeah.
said, where it's like, remove everyone's opinion of you. True
Yeah.
confidence isn't me getting a like on Instagram because I feel sexy or I need validation of being sexy, which I struggle with. It's feeling sexy without any validation from anybody.
Mhm.
How do we make sure our kids feel that way?
And it feels good, and that feels great when you have that.
Yeah.
Like, it really does. Like, you're like, "I look good, I'm doing this for me." Like, it
Yeah.
does, and that
Yes.
thank God that's happened, more and more as I've gotten older,
Yes.
but, like, it's taken a lot to get here.
I think that's so important though, like, because I'm guilty of really just like, Frankie she's my kid. I think she's adorable. We all think our kids are adorable, right? So I'm looking at her and I'm just like, you're so fucking cute. I want to like rip your head off. You're so cute. Mama loves you. And like I said, I'm trying to make sure I'm following it up with other stuff, because I don't want to say on here like don't acknowledge beauty or don't acknowledge how people feel or compliments and stuff like that. If somebody looks attractive or feels like, I think it's important to tell people, hey, you look beautiful. Hey, you
Yeah.
know, you've been working out. You look great. Like, you don't want to remove it. It's just that that's not all of it.
That's not all of it.
That's
Yeah.
not all of it. You know, like Carla,
Like,
when,
let it be a part of the pie, but don't let
yeah,
it be the whole pie.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And the whole like sexualizing part, you know, I was having this conversation with the mom at Frankie's school recently too. We were talking about it. It's like as they're getting older, and it's like those conversations are going to come up. You know, Frankie asked me the other night on the couch. I told you she's at that age, right? She's like, when I call them chi-chis, because I don't know what else to call them. So they're my chi-chis. And so she's like, Mom, when did you get your chi-chis? And I was like, I was like 13 years old, you know, and I got them. And then I was like, they're there to help feed your babies. Like, I was like, they're made to give your babies
They
milk.
have
Like,
a
they have a
function.
function. That's what I was
Yeah.
trying to say, is that like we get our chi-chis because ultimately they're there to, like, which is true, feed our babies, right? Like that was
Yeah.
originally like just like a cow or something why we got them. Not
Yeah.
for some sexualized, you know, pleasure of others. It was to provide a service.
Right. Right. Yeah.
You know, so I was like, yeah, that's what they were for. And she was like, well, am I going to get them? And I'm like, yeah, you're going to get them too. And it's like these conversations when they happen, it's like we have to figure out, and I guess that's what you and I are trying to do basically, is that conversation of how do we effing have these conversations? And we're going to fuck up. We're going to fuck up. We
Yeah.
are
Totally.
like
Totally.
as
Yeah.
mothers. But
Yeah.
how do we have these conversations? How do we word this stuff so that they're not thinking that, however you guys want to do it, fine, but that the bees are planting here and that the birds are putting, like, let's have real conversations about
Yeah.
things, but let's
Yeah.
not like make it the emphasis of like sexuality, right? I don't want her to think that by mommy having those boobs I'm sexy, right? Like maybe she never gets any boobs. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like your body
That's
shape doesn't matter. And her stating that in the car the other day, she's hearing that from the boys at school.
mm-hmm.
They're saying
Yeah.
that now.
Yeah. See, that's a tough one because like we can do as much as we can
I know. Oh
on our
yeah.
part, but once they get released into the world and
They're going to
into the
hear it.
wild,
They're going to hear it.
yeah, they're going to hear it, but I'm going to try my best to like put that foundation down because like I even with my mom, like she valued that in me. Like she was very proud when people would
Of
say, "Oh,
course.
you have such a
Yep.
beautiful daughter or a
Yep.
beautiful daughter." She took so much pride in that.
Yep.
Not that like I accomplished this or I accomplished this. Like no, it was that. Like that
So
was like, "Oh, you know, that's
my
great."
father was the same way, and he was a boxer, he was a trainer, and he put so much pressure on me to stay physically fit. And I would gain weight and I'd fluctuate, and I struggled with eating disorders all the time. But I would remember like showing up sometimes at the gym and him being like, "You got to lose weight." Like just straight, like flat out, like, "You got to lose weight." And it was like hard because I was so young. And then
Mhm.
my mom, as you know, my mom, like she was always very fit, very thin, very pretty, like very sexy. And I saw that as my mom. And it was like, I need to be that, right? Like that.
Yeah.
And then my dad has all this pressure that women need to look like that.
Yeah.
And so it was like my dad made me feel, well, I was more valuable when I looked my best.
Mhm.
When I was thin, he was like happier with me, right?
Yeah.
And when I would be with my mom and like all of the mom friends, like when I'd go to homes, they would almost like me more when I was like really thin. Mind you, I was 13 with an eating disorder. So
Oh my gosh.
13. And I'm
Yeah.
starving myself so that the moms around me look at me and validate my thigh gap.
Oh my god. That's terrible.
But then you watch that go into your adult, like it gets
Yeah.
lost. And that's where the Pamela thing happened, where it's like it gets, you don't even know how it starts to play into your, it's like a hidden thing develops.
Mhm.
And that opinion and that validation and that importance stays there. Whether you
Oh
think
yeah.
it's there or not, it stays there.
It stays. Absolutely.
You know, your mother gave value and that you were pretty. Your school gave value that you were beautiful, Carla. Like you were getting verbal validations of how beautiful you were.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is like, it's kind of fucked me up.
Yeah,
So
right.
it's like, my God, I can't believe that was just something. I mean, like, no one knew better, right? Like, this is how they grew up. This
Yeah.
is how, but like, now we're understanding, at least like I am and you are,
Yes.
after we
Yes.
watch these things, we have these conversations, like,
Yes.
how important it is for us. I'm not saying everybody needs to do this, but how important it is for us, because we've experienced this in our lives, that our daughter learns
Yes.
that there's so much more outside of that. Sure, that's great. All right. But it's not anything she can control. It's just, or they can control. So, like, let's leave that as like oh, and by the way, you're so pretty, like, as like an afterthought. But the fact that they're smart and they work really hard and they have a good heart and they're kind, just like all of those things need to be what's at the forefront. Like, going back to what you said, can you imagine if that was what we had as role models? This world would be a different place.
I can't. It makes me almost like just like I couldn't imagine Carla being a little girl going back and like
Oh
hearing
my God.
hearing those voices of, did you study, baby? Like, let's work on like, let's work on your school, or let's do this, or like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And like, nobody paid attention to any of that for me.
Yeah.
It was just, look at her. She's so pretty. She's
Yeah.
really thin right now. She's been, vomiting for a month, but she looks great. She's on TV. We don't care that she's probably destroying her soul with how she's behaving on TV. Let's just be happy she's on TV.
Right.
Right? Like, nobody stopped to just be like, "Are you like are you
Yeah.
good?"
Yeah.
Right? Because you get lost in that. And I never want to do that with Frankie. And I know you never want to do that with your daughter, but like, I think these conversations are important because if more of us parents, right, like the world we imagine, like a perfect, better world, or the more conversations and the more women that talk about it, like Pamela Anderson, which I love that she did, it's like the more we can recognize that and try, at least try not to do that to these next generations,
Yeah. Yeah.
to remove that as such a heavy piece of their becoming a woman.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. People associate looking good to being good. If she looks good, she must be good. Or if he looks good, they must be good. Like, as if that dictates every other aspect in someone's life. And most people are just like completely broken inside. But
Yeah.
if you look good, you must be good.
Yeah, and you want your kid to be with this crowd or this person or date this person or marry this person, because it's aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
And then you find so many relationships that I know that are together based on things like that, and there's not much deeper than that, right? Like, that was
Yeah.
missed in the relationship, but like, it's removing that because it did more harm to me and me figuring out who I am than good, you know? And it's left me, which isn't bad, but and you, I think, as well, like, left us here getting into our 40s going like, hmm, just we're getting
I want
older.
to be remembered for something more,
Yeah. Oh my
you
god, I
know?
would love it if Frankie and Nava were just like, our moms were badass and they were smart and they were intelligent and they had this incredible space for women and they did so much for women. Like, I hope that those are the words, not my mom was so pretty.
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah. I really, really hope that is not something that she's like, oh, yeah, that was all my mom was. Ugh.
Yeah, like, that's it, and like, when we're doing this podcast and she comes in and she wants me edit and stuff because Frankie's older, right? Like, I'll tell her, like, mommy and Auntie Carla have this podcast and it's for women. And like, I want her to understand what I'm doing. She
Mhm.
walked in one of the days that I was editing and she was just kind of like watching. And I wasn't opposed to her like listening to some of the conversation because, oh, and then I had Jay Shetty on his book, right? I had him
Yeah.
on and I was like getting ready the other day and she walked in, but the conversation he was having was so good. And even though she's like 7, she'll be 7, I was like, we're going to have this kind of like in the background. Like, I'm going
Mhm.
to have this type of dialogue in the background. How about this dialogue on instead of like Baywatch on TV or some ridiculous show that I grew up with, like, Roseanne or some shit is like how we grew up. You know what I mean? Or like Married
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
Children. Like, fuck that. Like, I'm going to have Jay Shetty and Mel Robbins on so that like that you're like hearing that shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. I know. I'm listening to all that in my
I
car, and
know, me
although
too.
she's, like, barely 2, I'm like,
Yes.
I want this to be what she remembers, like,
Yes.
these amazing people who have amazing perspectives, who've, like, worked really hard, who've gotten to
Self-love.
where they are, you know? Like, that's what
Yeah,
that's
and then that's
who
why,
to
like, there
aspire
was a
to.
part of me that wanted to turn it off because I don't normally let her listen to adult content. Like, that's still not something I'm just that's me. Everyone does what they want, but we don't watch like adult TV or listen to adult content yet because for me words matter. They just matter.
Mhm.
And so when she walked in, it was that moment of no, this is adult content that really does matter. And I do
Mhm.
want you to hear even your mom listening to something like this so that you
Mhm.
know that I have value in this,
Yeah.
that I hold this type of conversation important.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like I want our daughters to just already be looking and working on that self love at a young age.
Totally. Absolutely. It
Like,
does. I do think that because we're aware of it, and I think a lot of parents are more aware of it now, that understanding that like putting yourself first is not a bad thing. So I do think that this next generation of kids moving forward are really going to be super mindful of that, which then the relationships and the families that they have and the friendships that they have are going to be so much more deep and meaningful because they themselves have it's been instilled in them from
yeah,
when they were young.
yes,
Take care of yourself. You are
yes,
important. You are
yes.
worthy. You do need to love yourself. When you look in the mirror, give yourself a high five, like Mel Robbins. Mel Robbins says, and I do that with Nava every day. Like we do that. Give yourself a high five. Like you're awesome.
I
So I
love
think
that.
am hopeful. I am hopeful for the future because I do think that so many of us are more aware of that now.
Yeah, I mean, you and I and so many of our peers, I know that, and the women that we have, like, we're really passionate about like this kind of these self development, right? Like,
Yeah.
we all spend a lot of time reading and listening to these speakers, and we it matters to us. It matters to us, I assume, because we need it so bad because we didn't have it so bad growing up. Like the women that we had together for the F at Madres event, and we were all together talking. I feel like so many of us grew up with those pieces missing, and so we're
Mhm.
desperate for some
Mhm.
content. We're
Yeah.
desperate for something so much deeper, and we are desperate for some self-healing because
Mhm.
our parents, it's not their, it's just how it was in that generation, right? Things
Yeah.
happen that we just didn't get that.
Mhm.
They didn't do that work,
Mm-mm.
right? So
No.
we were left to do it. But we can do
Mhm.
it, and then we can help our kids do it, and hopefully it just gets better and better and better and slower and slower and slower, despite how beauty driven our society is. And I think it's
Mhm.
probably worse than we were when we were kids.
Yes, because they have so much more access
That's
to
what,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. Like at least there like then they had like the supermodel. We had like Cindy Crawford and
Kate
those
Moss.
types of women, and there was like a handful of them. And those were the people that you aspired to be, but now it's just like all over and all types, and it's just like, oh god.
What I mean, social media, Instagram, and that's a whole nother conversation with our girls and like, what they're seeing even within it's like girls are become celebrities that are just in their school
Yeah.
based on nothing other than how they look in a photo.
I know.
And that's
I
where that
know.
that girl gets her value.
Yeah.
We didn't have that growing up.
No.
We had the popular, the pretty, the girls like that, but we didn't have like how many likes and how many views and how many followers you got based on how pretty your photo was for our
Mhm.
girls to then compare themselves to.
Yeah.
And if we don't start having these conversations with them before that becomes so real, you know,
Mhm.
if anything, and it sounds like for you and I, we are left with the lingering last bit of what our parents made us feel. That stays. No matter what happens through life, that stays with you. How your parents like put value in you. So as
Mhm.
long as you and I are making an effort to put this other value in our kids, regardless of which direction they go,
Yeah.
I want that to be what's left. I want them to
Mhm.
remember at the end of the day. Mom
Yeah.
always, mom and dad always said, or mom and mom, or dad and dad always said, this is where your value is.
Mhm. Yeah.
and that they come
Yeah.
back to that, right? Like, what else can
Mhm.
we do?
Yeah. Yep, we're breaking the cycle, or at least trying.
That's exactly what it is. It's breaking that cycle.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're trying.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
I think, like, kudos to the celebrities that speak up on this, and to the conversations here. I would welcome other moms who, if you guys are um like feeling affected by this or have conversations about this, I'd like to hear from other moms about this
I would.
conversation,
I would. It's such
right?
an it's like again, like it's a weird topic to talk about like your looks, but there's obviously like a reason why we brought it up is because we have these two daughters and we grew up a certain way being validated for that and we want that not to be the case for our daughters. So there's got to be other moms out there that feel that same way. And so that's why we want to talk about it.
I'd be curious how some of you guys are handling these conversations with your older girls. Like, write us. Like, we can even share this stuff on social media if you're open to it, because I'd love to give advice
Mhm.
and like open a conversation up. If you have an F it moment where you really were able to like turn this around and speak in a different way to your kid, like, we want to know.
Yeah,
Like,
we totally do. We totally do.
we welcome this conversation to expand. And I would say, Carla, right, like any conversations that we start to bring up that are a little bit like weird to talk about, like, please, if you have more to say, join us in these conversations, because
Yes.
we are just trying to figure this out.
Yeah. And like these are conversations that are being had, I'm sure. We're just having it here with you. So
Hmm.
yeah, like she said, if you have more to say or even if you have a different opinion, we would love to hear.
Yes.
We'd love to have a discussion because it was a really interesting topic for us because of our experiences in our lives and we happen to be affected by watching something that got this conversation going. And so we welcome it. We welcome it all.
Yeah. Yeah, we would love to. We'd love to have you on. We'd love to hear your opinion. If you disagree with us, I'd still like to talk to you. Like,
Yeah. Well, I guess this is where we say just
just
F
F
it.
it.